We are back to continue our conversation with Surfer Jim about first principles and Bitcoin. And when we left off, we were beginning to talk about Bitcoin as this new incorruptible money that humankind has put together. And now I wanted him to talk about and expound upon what he thinks the goods and the new behaviors that are going to take place because of this incorruptible money over the next 100 years. Go ahead and kind of expound on that.
Well, I think you can see it already in the people that are true Bitcoin believers. We talk about something called time preference in this space all the time. People with a high time preference are not really thinking much about the future, and people with a low time preference are. And what you find is people that learn about Bitcoin and realize the type of money that it is and what it might be able to do for their own future tend to change their time preference and lower it so that they are unwilling to spend their current income on frivolous things. Better to save that income in the form of Bitcoin because it's likely that its purchasing power will be greater in the future. And so you find that initially the very first thing that happens to people is their time preference changes as soon as they understand Bitcoin. They're more willing to save money and spend less on junk right now.
Jim, did your and my grandparents have that time preference understanding though? Because they had a gold standard, they had a sound money standard, and it wasn't 50 years ago. I've been numb to it. I mean, I'm 54 years old, and so I've never lived in a sound money standard. I don't even know what those decisions should look like. So are we reinserting the right thought processes that we had 100 years ago?
I honestly think that's accurate to look at it that way. That is to say that 100 years ago, we were on a gold standard and people could actually count on saving and having that purchasing power at least not fade away and possibly be worth more. I can remember in my 20s, I had a job in the financial services industry, and interest rates were upwards of 20% on certain investments. And mortgage interest rates were 10 and 15%.
I remember that.
Common. People just, like that was normal because the economy was a little bit more functioning around true value, the value of real companies, the value of real items. And we actually had money that was backed by gold up until 1971. So when I started seeing those interest rates, those high interest rates in the 80s, that we were already off the gold standard, but the residual effects in people's minds of where to put money and how to invest it, I still think we're stuck in the mindset that we have this money that's still good, right? That because it was backed by gold, you had at least a stable monetary base that you can judge things by. But once we took that away, I think it took a few generations for people to really kind of realize that, wait a minute, this money's not as good as it used to be.
And that rug
society's really feeling the effects now. Yeah, we got rug pulled 50 years ago, and it took 50 years for the real outfall to hit everybody. It's really starting to hit now, especially with the government just printing insane amounts of money out of thin air.
Yeah, the initial jerk was pretty severe though, because in 1976 we were facing stagflation, we were facing the 17% interest rates that you were talking about, and people who had a sound money standard or mindset, they didn't know what was going on. And like you said, yes, we talk about Bitcoin being gradually then suddenly. I think it was suddenly then gradually when it came to the change from a gold standard to the fiat system. It took a huge amount of adjustment. It wasn't until 1980, 1981 when we started to actually have an economy that began to adjust to a fiat system.
Yeah, and then of course the government gets in the way and injects a bunch of money and tweaks the whole thing so that the natural what's the word?
The ebbs and flows.
The way it would flow naturally is messed up because price signals are no longer accurate because there's fake money being not fake money, but money being injected with
call it what it is.
Work. Well, fiat money's garbage. We know that. But the point is, though, that it's just been corrupted by a handful of people who get to manipulate it. And that's where money is broken. So the concept of money is a good one. We as humans had some good forms of money to work with. There were certain societies that worked perfectly well using seashells for a while until somebody figured out we can break this. There's a whole story about the agri beads in Africa and the glass beads that the Europeans were able to manufacture and flood the markets and all these different, so like man is always going to try and take advantage of his neighbor if he can get away with it. And, in the realm of money, depending on what level you're at, government level gets to mess with a lot of people's lives by messing with money, So it's such an important tool in our survival and our prosperity that we need the best one available. And, we had it in the form of gold to whatever extent gold was actually working. But then again, I'll call them smart. They're really more evil than smart, but the smart people out there figured a way to take advantage of the shortcomings of a physical gold that was turned into paper so we could make it easier on ourselves. And that's where it all broke. As soon as people weren't carrying actual gold around and they replaced it with some paper that represented the gold, that's when the people behind storing the gold figured out they can just get away with murder. And, it's sad. It's the greed of humanity. What's good about Bitcoin is all the game theory incentives that are built into Bitcoin allow for human greed to just make Bitcoin better. It doesn't ruin it. Like the greed of humanity in Bitcoin actually makes Bitcoin better and stronger every damn day. Whereas the other way around, people learned how to break the money. The greed in Bitcoin only makes the money stronger. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and you called Bitcoin something. I'm gonna quote back to you what you said during your talk, is that Bitcoin is not natural, but it's man-made in alignment with man's nature. And you didn't expound upon man's nature, but I take a look at Bitcoin and I go, we understand that man's nature is not basically good, but it's basically evil. You just said it. You said, people will take advantage of other people when given the opportunity. And with the game theory, it's like, well, if I try to affect this evil, if I try to take advantage of the system, or if I try to take advantage of people, well, then it's only going to completely destroy the value of what Bitcoin is, that which I'm trying to steal. So there's really no reason to do that. That's the game theory that you're talking about. And so, we can talk about, man's nature. If we thought that man was basically good, then we wouldn't need a decentralized system. We need a decentralized system because we need more and more people to be accountable to, because we know that we have the tendency to try to take advantage of other people and their rights, which is why the thousands of nodes is, I call it the separation of powers to more than just 3 branches of government. Now we have 1,000 different branches of government that say that's not going to work. We're going to keep it the same because you got to show a heck of a lot of people that a change in the protocol is actually good for everybody before there's a change. And that's why Bitcoin, to me, is the best money that there can be, because trying to change it is so difficult.
So interesting that, we're talking about our nature, and that man, unfortunately, most people, if given an opportunity to cheat, might take it if they thought they weren't going to get caught. Well, I would hazard a guess that almost everybody would take it if they knew they weren't going to get caught,
right.
Which is sad. It's a sad commentary on our humanity. But the flip side of that is I think that people are generally honest and want to live an honest life, because they were going back to those things in the last talk we had, which was about things like honesty, integrity, trust and trustworthiness, loyalty, those kind of things. You realize, I look at it this way: you can't get through this earth, through this life on your own. We are interdependent people. We need each other. And the idea that if you recognize that, you realize that in order to need other people and for them to need me, a certain level of honesty and trust and integrity need to be involved. So that although our deep down nature might want us to cheat, our higher intellect will more times than not override that and cause us not to cheat, because we realize that in the long run, we're going to lose. Like, you can win the short run by cheating, but in the long run, you can't win.
That's the tug of war within every human being.
It's, like the angel and the devil on each shoulder,
Sure.
right? Every day we struggle with, should we be honest or should we cheat? I think generally more people lean towards honesty because they realize in the long run, it gets them more better stuff. And unfortunately, if given the opportunity to cheat, believing they can get away with it, they probably will. But that goes towards our self-preservation nature. We are always looking out for ourselves first, whether whether you want to admit it or not. There's people out there that think that we should live for the collective, but those very same people are making decisions every day, thousands of them potentially, that put their desires and needs first, whether they recognize it or not. Whether it's, going to get some food when your body tells you you're hungry, right? Like, you have to make that decision. That's you taking care of yourself. And when you go to work, it's you trying to provide for you and your family. Like, we all do things that put ourselves first in this world. And unfortunately, when we think, some people think they can cheat to get ahead for themselves, they'll do it. But more often than not, I do think that on the whole, people will act in more honorable, honest ways, even when no one's looking, because sometimes it's just they want to be able to live with their own conscience. No, they didn't cheat somebody. Sometimes that's all it takes. Other people are very altruistic. They just want to give, and they feel good about it, and they don't want to cheat people because they just want to give. They have plenty to give in time or money, and they just want to do it, and they love themselves better for it. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons, but fundamentally, it comes down to these truths in the world, right? The truth of money, the truth of gravity, or the truth of integrity. They're there. They're not necessarily precisely measurable, but if you poll enough people, as we talked about last time, you can create a bell curve that can show you where approximately honesty lies for any given thing, or trustworthiness is for people. And I just think that when you have a good, strong, solid money to align around, more people are going to live more honest lives and be less likely to cheat, because they've got this really good tool to work with that gives everybody an advantage, over the crappier version of that same tool that we were forced to use by governments.
You ended your talk prematurely at BitBlockBoom with a closing statement, and it wasn't intended to be a closing statement. It was intended to be the premise from which you were going to go into the better behaviors and the better good for humankind, and that was this. You called Bitcoin a tuning fork, but you never had the opportunity to really expound on that. Go ahead and take some time to do that.
All right. So what we talked about last time regarding sound, the sort of the perfection that is in sound, and as humans, we have categorized the different frequencies of vibration, right? So notes in music are frequencies of vibration. We've categorized them. We've been able to measure them. And so if you're a conductor with an orchestra, you want all the instruments to blend well. You want to make sure they're all tuned correctly. So you take out a tuning fork, which is one single note that's predetermined, and everybody tunes their instrument to align with that one single note. Once that's done, even though all those instruments are playing different notes or different melodies and different speeds, as a musician, you understand this. Mm-hmm. What comes out is a beautiful song. Potentially the coordination of a whole bunch of people doing completely different things is allowed because they all tuned into a single starting point. And that's money. If we have a single starting point that everybody on the planet can tune into, we can get coordination on this planet like we've never seen before. And I just think prosperity in every part of life will flourish beyond our wildest dreams when everybody has the single source of truth in money, which is Bitcoin.
And affects the term which I inserted into our conversation last week, which was synergy.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in synergy. So there's a book out called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's been out for decades.
Stephen Covey, yep.
Yep, and I got the audio version of that book on cassette tapes back when cassette tapes were a thing, which is in my lifetime. But I drove around with that. It was a 4-tape set, mm-hmm. Probably about 4 hours worth of him lecturing about the book he wrote. So I got to hear him speak about his own concepts. I was so enamored by this theory of these 7 habits that I couldn't get enough. I probably listened to those tapes more than 50 times. That's like reading the same book 50 times. So I fully believe in the concept of synergy, which is what comes out of the first 5 habits in his book, right? Synergy is the third of the 3 public habits, All right. So I'm just going to review them for people who aren't familiar. So the first habit is be proactive. That is, you have to take charge of your life. You can't be reactive to things. You have to plan it out if you really want to have success or get anywhere. So these are the first three habits are called personal habits by his definition. So if you're going to be proactive, the second habit is to begin with the end in mind. That is, think where you want to go and then work your way backwards to where you are now. So that's being proactive. Just the fact that you would think that through is a proactive act. So you cannot get to step 2 without actually doing step 1.
That's sort of like you taking
proactive.
Yeah, that's sort of like you taking apart your lawnmower to try to figure out how to put it back together.
In a way, right? You're going backwards to figure out how it was built, right? So like if you're planning your own life, if you begin with the end in mind, if you know where you want to go, it's a lot easier to get there if you just know where you want to go. That act alone is a proactive act on your part to decide where you want to land a year from now, 10 years from now, it doesn't matter. Pick any goal. And if that's the case, habit 3 is to put first things first, which is to prioritize your life and figure out what should you work on today that's really going to matter towards the things you say you want in the future, your habit 2. So those first 3 habits are private habits. They allow you to get control of your own life. And I don't think you can argue with any of them. Try. He wrote a book, I think it was like the opposite of the 7 habits. And if you study those opposite things, you'll realize that they're failure. They're going to lead to failure every time. If you're reactive to everything, you're not going to get anywhere. If you don't put begin with the end in mind, you'll just be like going through life not knowing where the hell you're going, right? If you don't prioritize things, you'll spend time on wasteful things, realizing 2 years later, holy crap, if I had only done this, I would have that new car I've been wanting. Like any number of things. So like, these are non-arguable in my opinion. So then you get into the next 3 habits, which is habit 4, which is one of the really most important things, is to always think win-win, right? If you're not thinking, I want to win, but I also want the person I'm dealing with to win also, long-term relationships are not going to work, right? This is where honesty and integrity come in. So if you're thinking win-win, that is, you want to win, but you also want the other person to win. In any interpersonal relationship, the outcome is going to be happy and positive for both people, because if they think they won and you think you also won, there's no losers. Who's mad? Nobody's mad. But if I win and you lose, I'm happy, but you're not. If you win and I lose, I'm just a martyr because I allowed that to happen. So I'm not going to be happy. And if we both lose, what's the point? Right? We shouldn't have even started. So there's really only one outcome worth shooting for, which is a win-win outcome in all interpersonal relationships. If you care about those relationships lasting for any amount of time, then you get into the 5th habit, which is one of the best ones ever, which is seek first to understand and then be understood. Right? It's a two sides of a single coin. You want to understand the other person. That's how you can get to win-win. If you know what they want, you could tailor your side of the equation to help them get what they want. But if you also don't get them to understand what you want, they can't work as well in this interchange, right? So seek first to understand, but then be understood. You want the other person to understand you as well. The advantage, if you know this principle, is that if you seek first to understand, you are then in a much better position to articulate your perspective, phrasing things in ways that will resonate with them because you already know what they want, right? As opposed to say, listen, I want to make a deal with you and here's what I want. Well, you have no idea how they're going to react to what you're about to say.
They're thinking, I don't care. Yeah.
Right, right. But when you say to them, listen, I want to get this deal done with you. I want to understand you. Please tell me what it is about your situation that will help me to get you to where you need to get, or so that you can make this deal with me. When they tell you all the things they care about, see, like I sell construction services all the time. Luckily, I knew this principle 30 years ago, and I was able to use this to my advantage. Whenever I'm meeting with a customer, I get to find out all the things they care about in this project so that when I make a proposal to them, hopefully I hit everything that matters and they go, damn, this guy's going to give me exactly what I want. Perfect. Let's hire him. Right. So this concept of seek first to understand and then be understood is absolutely paramount in interpersonal relationships of all kinds. Right. So then if in fact you can do that, you lead to the word you brought up, which is synergy. Habit 6 is to synergize. not compromise. Compromise is always when someone loses. Synergy is when both people win. You figure out a way where you both can work and get this deal done, and you both feel like you've won. That's synergy. So those are the first 6 habits. And in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, habit 7, he calls sharpen the saw, which is to always be working on all 6 simultaneously every day. So if you're not always thinking proactive, if you're not always thinking begin with the end in mind and prioritizing, putting first things first, if you're not always thinking win-win, asking for the other person's perspective and trying to synergize, you're not working on this. Is just every day. You have to do this every day for all things with interpersonal relationships, even sometimes with relationships with yourself, promises you've made to yourself for things you want. I want to lose weight. I want to work out more. I want my surfing to be better. These are deals you can make with yourself, and you still got to come up with the same, you still got to analyze all those same parameters, just trying to figure out what it is you want, let alone trying to work with other people out there in the world. So that book was one of the best books I've ever read, and I encourage anybody to read it because it's fundamental first principles about our own nature. Like, why do we care about certain sounds? Why do we gravitate towards certain images? And why do we need money in this world? Because it's part of our nature. It helps us get what we want and enjoy this life we've been given. So Bitcoin is important. I think it's inevitable because it's the best form of money. And, at this point, I don't think anyone could stop it. So I'm happy that I'm living at this time. I get to see this play out. It's freaking awesome.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute blessing to know what I know when I know it. I had no control over that, and to be where I am, and to be able to have this kind of communication like we're having, and the amount of education, information, and just struggling with ideas, which is a good thing, by the way, is something that was going to help everybody involved. And when you insert a sound money, an almost perfect money, obviously nothing's perfect. There are flaws in everything, but we ain't found it yet, and that is going to be very difficult to find. And the way the game theory works, it's like, even if we do find it, why would we even want to expose it? That's crazy. But just, you talked about the Bitcoin being, it is this incorruptible money because of the game theory, because the human tendency to try to take advantage of other humans is taken out of that equation, because then you just hurt yourself in the process. Yeah. Which is that's one thing that you talked about, a couple of things that you talked about that you surmised that will happen because of Bitcoin over the next 100 years. You talked about ideological harmony and eventually world peace. And so, what are the steps that are going to happen because of Bitcoin, and how is that going to work that self out?
Well, if you just I think about this a lot, and it's not to say that I have the exact answer or I can articulate the exact path, but I do see it already happening. So whenever I meet my Bitcoin friends in real life, the camaraderie and the alignment, the ideological alignment that I feel and that they also say they feel is not debatable. Like, it's there. There is something going on. There's an energy that is happening amongst people that are ideologically aligned that I don't know if anybody can explain. And yet it's there. Everybody feels it, right? And that will permeate outward through all of society, little by little by little, as each person recognizes the truth of this form of money, and they can't mess with it, and they can't cheat, and they then start to align themselves with it. They will start to see that, how can I even explain this? I feel like business deals will get less, will have less corruption. There'll be less cheating, right? Because you can't. All right, I gotta go on a little bit of a tangent here. When you've got money that's controllable by people, and you have rules in society that are controllable by people, those people can write the rules that favor them, even if they hurt other people. So we've got currently governments of the world, which are simply a collection of other humans who have gained power over the rest of the citizenry because they have control of money through central banking and politics. We now have some U.S. Congress people, senators and representatives that believe in Bitcoin, own Bitcoin, and will do whatever it takes to make sure Bitcoin doesn't fail and that laws are not written against Bitcoin to screw with this network and their own personal worth. And so the more people in government that come to this realization, the less likely those that represent government will not only try to destroy Bitcoin, but will even be able to destroy Bitcoin and do anything to affect it. So now what happens is, so for example, right now, people in government can write words on paper that can ruin other people's lives, that give advantages to big corporations, that get to make money unfairly. All these things happen because some people control money. They only get away with it because they have paid enforcers. These paid enforcers will uphold the words on paper to the extent they'll actually kill other humans because those other humans didn't want to follow the words on paper. It's really sad, but police and military of this planet have authority to kill other people that don't follow some words on paper written by some humans. It's beyond disgusting but they're allowed to do it because they have other enforcers that will back them up and protect them. Just watch any of these protesters and watch all these police get in big groups and protect themselves, right? Even if they're being backed up by a large group, they're gonna coordinate with each other, all because they get paid really well. As soon as the money they get paid in starts going to crap, they'll start quitting. It's a slow transition. It's going to take a couple of generations, but it's going to happen. The paid enforcers will quit, and the people with the power will lose that power.
That's not to say, I just want to clarify because that's a huge statement. I think that you would agree that some sort of law enforcement is still going to be necessary because there are still going to be bad actors, and there's still going to need there's still going to need to be something there to be accountable to, and it has to represent
Absolutely.
It has to represent the people. I know that you would agree with that. I just want to make sure that we're clear.
I agree, and it will happen. It will happen on a smaller scale. Large worldwide nation states will diminish. Right? There's no reason a handful of people in Washington should have the power to control 300 million people in this country. It's absurd.
Oh, that was never the intent.
You can't write one rule for everybody.
That was never the intent.
It should never have gotten to this point, but it did, because we as a society allowed the federal government to control the money, right? Through the central banks, right? A small group of people controls a giant group of people. And you see it in evidence everywhere with the people that are willing to wear masks all day long, take an experimental chemical into their arm because those people at the top said to do it. And if you don't, you're getting in trouble. We will write words on paper that steal money out of your bank account, or we will stick you in a box if you don't listen to us. And that only happens because they control the money. Once they don't control the money anymore, they can't control the enforcers, and they will not be able to control the people. Now, what happens is enforcement goes right down to the local level where it should be. And people in their local communities will pay the strongest in their community to protect them from outsiders and from the people within that community who would break the rules of that community, right? So it's not to say we can't have rules, but we don't need rulers like we have now, right? We will need enforcers, but those enforcers will get paid by the group of people that they are protecting directly. And the group of people paying will know what the cost is.
Exactly.
Right? We don't know what it costs to run the military because it's just buried in the federal budget, and they get to print money out of thin air and bomb strangers on the other side of the planet because they win. And we just get, I'm living here in America. I don't see bombs landing in my neighborhood, so I get to live my life. But there's a bunch of people stealing my wealth by printing money, giving it to the military industrial complex so they can own giant yachts and do whatever they want. And what's going on with the whole COVID thing? I don't want to.
That's a whole nother cup of coffee. That's a whole nother cup of coffee.
No, but it is. But, you got Big Pharma winning big time. Why? Because someone wrote words on paper and enforcers are enforcing it.
Just to boil it down, and this is what the fiat money system has done, and I know that you'll agree with this, is that there are two ways that the federal government can actually fund what it does. And that is through explicit taxes, which we have the opportunity to vote on. That's taxation with representation. And through the printing of money, which creates inflation, which steals our value from us, which is taxation without representation. And I think that you and I agree that that is the main gist of the problem. And this is where Bitcoin actually creates an accountability for governance for all people across the world. I
agree, but even the taxation part that we vote on, so voting is inherently evil because that's just two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner.
Sure. Okay.
So, voting is in and of itself not fair because the majority can tell the minority what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And taxation, just generally, taxation is theft, no matter how you look at it, because I don't have the right to go to your neighborhood and me and your neighbor say to you, hey, look, you see this piece of paper? We wrote some words that says, you owe us some money. We're neighbors, but we agree. You got to give us money. You got more than we got, and we want some of it. And you're going to be like, who the hell are you? Well, that's all government is. It's just other people saying, give us some of your money. And we wrote these words over here on this piece of paper that says we're allowed to say that, and you have to give it to us. It's just the most insane concept I've ever, I didn't even get it until I got Bitcoin. But now I see this whole thing as the biggest ruse ever perpetrated on humanity. Governments are disgusting. They're just power-hungry humans stealing the productivity of their neighbors every day by saying, well, we voted on it. It's not just me. No, that's bull crap all day long. I own my body and my resources, and you don't get to vote with your neighbors to take it away. Where did you get that right? You don't have it naturally. You gave it to yourself because you got more power over me. You have the guns. That's it. That's the only reason this group of humans gets to steal the resources of everybody else. They control the money, which controls the violence through the people that are willing to partner with them. So all military, all law enforcement are helping to destroy this planet by being loyal to the governments they get paid from. Every damn one of them. I don't care if they're a secretary in an office in the government. They're helping the government mechanism to stay alive and destroy the lives of other people. They all should just quit, but they won't because they get paid really good. How many times have you heard people say, oh, yeah, I got this great job working for the state. I get prevailing wages now. I get all this great retirement benefits. Yeah, because the state wants to pay you to be loyal to them so they can keep their power, the state being other humans, the state being the state of New York or the state of the United States. It doesn't matter what level of government it is. When they can control money and pay people really well to stay loyal, those really loyal people will do it because they just want to survive.
So where's the balancing? Don't even realize where's the balancing point? Because earlier in the conversation, you said that people will pay to have law enforcers because people do have to be accountable for the bad actions that they do because they will. So where's that balancing point?
Well, I think the payment should be voluntary. And I think that people will. I mean, like before the government took over roads, people built roads, right? Everybody wants to say like you need the government to build roads and bridges. No, you don't. Private people did that all on their own because they wanted a road from here to there, and businesses will support roads all day long so their products can get to market. So we don't need government for all the things people think they need government for. And ultimately, I think that if the power gets taken away from these central giant authorities and is put back in the hands of communities, those communities will coordinate around what they care about. They will hire and pay for the enforcers that they think they need to protect them. And they will do it in a way that is accountable. Because if they're using Bitcoin, we can create systems that it's totally transparent who contributed how much and who's getting paid how much. So like there's accountability in the Bitcoin system where there isn't currently in the fiat system. And so all that changes everything. It changes people's incentives. It causes everybody to be more honest because they can't cheat because the ledger is public. I mean, there's so many things change because of this best form of money we now have. You can go down a million different like rabbit holes, let's call them, looking at the theories and the way these incentives may play out over time. And I've just touched on tiny little bits of them, right?
You have, and I would love to go down some more of those rabbit holes with you, perhaps in another conversation, because I think these are important things to discuss, because I've always been considering as Bitcoin becomes more and more popular and the network effect becomes stronger and stronger. What are the governmental issues, governance issues? I'll put it that way. What are the law enforcement issues? What is the balance? Because I agree with you. I think that Bitcoin is going to make it much more easy to hold those that we put in power voluntarily accountable.
Right.
And so,
exactly.
So I'd love to go down that rabbit hole with you, perhaps in another conversation. We have covered a whole ton of stuff. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for wrestling with me on some of those ideas. It really has been fun.
Kidding me? No, you've been a great host, and I love the questions you've given me, and just the opportunity to sit here and talk about Bitcoin. I mean, I could do this all day long. So I just appreciate you even wanting to talk to me in the first place, which is very nice of you. And I hope a lot of people get some kind of benefit out of this. One of the things I said in my BitBlockBoom talk at the very beginning was, we all value our time very highly, and I don't want to waste anybody's time. I was hoping that people that came to listen to me speak walked away with some kind of value so that they didn't think their time was wasted. And I really appreciate you even willing to use your time to talk to me, because your time is just as valuable to you as mine is to me. And that you were willing to speak to me about this stuff is very flattering, and I really appreciate it. I just hope the listeners get something valuable out of it.
Well, believe me, it's been my pleasure, and I think that some of our listeners would actually want to follow you and get some more information from you. So is there a way that people can follow you on social media, Twitter, or what have you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, really, Twitter is it. I didn't even want to do Twitter until I was convinced I had to learn about Bitcoin. So I have my Twitter at SurferJimW. That's really the best place to get me. My DMs are open, and I try to answer everything that people send to me. So reach out if you have questions. I'd be more than happy to talk.
Surfer Jim, it has been a pleasure talking with you over these last couple of episodes. I would love to have those conversations and dig down those rabbit holes that we've talked about before. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me here on the Bitcoin Effect and taking your time.
I appreciate it, and I'd be happy to come back anytime. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. If you've enjoyed this conversation, let me know by leaving me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Also, let me know in the comments section below who you would like to see me interview next on the Bitcoin Effect. Thanks for joining me.